Welcome to the Bloom House Podcast with Maris Gant and Andrea Oliver. Maris started a wedding planning business and grew as an entrepreneur. Andrea went the corporate event path. 10 years later, they're still learning from each other and comparing notes. From kids' playdates to ballrooms to boardrooms, they're still best friends, and they're sharing what they know, one episode at a time. Hello, podcast friends. Maris here. Today, we're going to talk about systems. Andrea is a systems superhero, and today I'm going to be asking her some questions about the processes and systems she's put into place in her life and her work. When I first started my business, I had zero systems in place. Andrea helped me not only streamline my workflow, but also start tracking my time so that I could see where my energy was going and, more importantly, charge for my time appropriately. There's a lot of noise out there about what you should and shouldn't be doing in your business and systemizing and daily routines. And I feel like Andrea's approach cuts through the sea of information and gets to the heart of what makes sense for the businesses and business owners. Hello, I'm Maris Gant.
And I'm Andrea Oliver.
Let's dive in. The first thing that I would love to ask you about is time tracking. In general, you can sort of take that. I know that's a big thing that you have always asked me about in my business. Whenever I'm struggling over something, you'll say, well, how much time are you spending on it? And of course, I have no idea. So,
yeah, absolutely. I feel like this is something that whenever you're trying to streamline a project, that the first time you do something, you waste a lot of time because you're figuring it out. But then if it's a repetitive process, you start to figure out where your time is going, but only if you're paying attention to it. And I feel like the best way to do that is to not before planning. Like, I feel like everything with my ideas of how to track and create systems comes back to tracking what you already did naturally versus telling yourself to do a thing. So with time tracking, it's how did I spend my time? And you write it all down. And sort of like the same concept with like calorie counting. If you're writing down everything you're eating, or food journaling, I guess, more so. If you're writing down everything you're eating, you're naturally going to start editing. If you are writing down all of the time tracking that you're doing, then you're going to be like, why did this task take too long? And you're going to figure out a way to do that portion of things more efficiently. Or in the case with your business, like we talked a lot about in the early days when you'd first started it, I noticed that you were spending really long days at the venue with the bride and charging almost nothing for it. And I was looking at your time just from the outside going, I don't think you're making minimum wage.
No, not at all. Not at all. I was like, no, I didn't even cap my time on wedding days. I didn't even say like we work 11 or 12 hours. It would be like 14 or 15. And I just thought that that's what I was supposed to do as a wedding planner until you came in and said, no.
Why don't we cap it at 10?
Well, we actually do 11 now because that works for some venues, but they, of course, can add extra time. But 11 on a wedding day is sort of standard.
Mm-hmm. And then there's charges for extra staffing and other things that went into that, which this process led to that. It started with how many hours are you giving to the client for the amount of money you're charging?
Mm-hmm. Because from wedding day, that's one thing. And then staffing is one thing. But then the amount of time you're spending on the front end. Like I do have it. I've actually never been that great at tracking like you tell me to do, but I can sort of average that with the average wedding management client, 30 hours for a low maintenance client, 40 to 50 for one you're going to, spend some more time with. And then I think with the level of full service wedding planning we do, really it's anywhere from 100 hours to 200. It's a really wide range with that. And we do a flat rate and not a percentage rate. So I really have to ballpark it in the beginning.
Right. But then after that, it's protecting your time.
Right. And it's at least based on some knowledge of the time that I have tracked a little bit since you told me to do it. Do you track project hours in like different places? I think like from a practical standpoint, how do people do this? Whether it's a spreadsheet or I know there's like Clockify and there's some apps But like, what's the most practical approach for doing this?
So I feel like the most practical approach is what works for the individual. Having to use a separate app for some people is really helpful to keep it in one place. And for other people, it's another thing to open and log into and deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you're a person who wants to keep a notebook and a little journal that you carry around with you everywhere that you write things down, and that's your thing, that's how you should do it. Don't invent a new system for creating a system.
Well,
so
that's
I usually use just
too.
a simple spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm. But like for each project?
It depends what I'm doing. So like, for volunteer hours right now is where I'm tracking everything. I try to keep track of what am I putting into, because I've been sitting on different boards and things. I try to track how much time I'm spending on all of those things just to have an idea for what to tell the next person who's coming into that role, or to figure out at what points in the year we can anticipate that it's going to take more of someone's time. And none of that was given to me when I came into those positions, but I try to leave the position with more information than was there when I started.
Mm-hmm.
And also I try to put systems in place to reduce some of that friction in the steps of everything that needed to happen. So I'd say per area, I like to use one spreadsheet that has separate tabs.
Ooh.
So I just go and it's all there in one place. And I could just be like, and for this project, and not project, but it's for, I guess, entities.
I'm going to implement that today because, I tell my associate planners, I'm like, please track the amount of hours that you're spending on your projects. Because when they get a wedding management client, I am paying them a flat rate. So it's like, okay, the flat rate, if they're doing 30 hours versus 60, say they're taking so much time, like, gosh, they need to get paid more, or I need to help them streamline the process. Like there's a problem there, but I'm not going to know that unless they are tracking it. So I wonder if I could set up a spreadsheet that has different tabs for each client. No, it's up to them to follow through with that. But I mean, I think if it were me, I would want to, if someone else is paying me, I want to make sure that I'm getting paid enough.
And then in that, you classify what the time is spent on. So is it including driving time? Driving time is super important to keep track of, just to know, like, because you need to budget for that. With the venues sometimes here being an hour away. So including drive time, though you can't charge for drive time, it's good to take into when you're budgeting for yourself for the next project to be like, well, if it's there, I need to assume that I'm also going to have another 15 hours of drive time in my planning sessions.
Ooh, so get specific.
Get specific. So it's what did you meet for? How long did you meet for? And I do in pretty much every tracking spreadsheet that I use, I always just have a column labeled notes for anything else I think is relevant.
Ooh, this is great. We should make one as like a giveaway or a download.
It's pretty simple to do, sure.
That's what I'm saying. We may put this in the show notes. We shall see. Okay. Well, that's great. I learned some things and I'm going to get to work as soon as I get home. The next question I have is similar and shares a word, but what are your thoughts on time blocking?
So I'm really bad at this too. Like I said a minute ago, where I do create my systems based on what I've like observing myself doing a thing versus trying to tell myself to do things. It's more about watching yourself versus forcing yourself into a cubby. But I'd say the biggest thing I do with time blocking is I use the reminders. This is one of my favorite Google Calendar hacks is using an all-day reminder. You can schedule them on your calendar for the future for all day, or you can schedule them today. But if you don't complete that task and mark it as done, it rolls automatically to the next day. So let's say I've got 6 projects going, and for each one I have 2 reminders set to keep myself roughly, I usually set them a couple days in advance so that I've got sort of like a few days to finish that reminder and still be on time. So it starts alerting me on day 1, but if that day's bonkers and I don't get to it, it gives me 2 more days to have to squeeze that in. But when I'm really busy and I'm getting closer into all my projects, I'll get to the point where they'll steamroll. And it just shows up on my calendar. It'll say reminders and it'll say 7. It'll say 15. When it gets to a certain number, that's when I block time to do everything on my reminders list. And usually it's when it gets around 6 or 7, I'll block an hour. If it's at 15, that means I'll usually stay late after work. Like I'll usually block a couple hours, or no, I just like, it's not getting done in my work day. I'm going to have to work overtime to get to that, or something along those lines.
That's really helpful too. Yeah, my work late is usually like, okay, I have to get up at 5 because I'm freshest first thing in the morning. But I love that. So I tried doing what you did in the Google Calendar with the tasks. But I like pen and paper a little more, and I use the full focus planner. And so with that, like you're just looking at one day at a time. And usually at night, anything that doesn't get done on Tuesday, I'm just going to handwrite on Wednesday. So it does that. But what the
I have that too. I have my task lists that are like you come out of a meeting and you've got follow-up, and I have sticky notes on my computer, and I have my task list. These are scheduled other like either bigger things, or it's more about getting them done on time. Being in the event world, you don't have to do this thing today, and maybe you can't do it today because you've got to wait for the RSVP deadline to close. You've got to wait for this other information to come in from another area before you can. Let's say the reminder is to send information to this partner. You can't send the information until it's all confirmed, and it should be confirmed by this date. So on that date, I put a reminder to send that information, which means I need to take 20 minutes or so to put all that information into the correct format and send it to them. So that's one of the examples of these are how I schedule my future time. I use all those tasks and lists and sticky notes for current time.
I feel like, what I'm taking from this is I'm doing the first step of what you're saying, but I'm not doing the second step. I'm not looking at this and then putting, an hour block based on this or a 2-hour block. I'm not putting the time in there. I mean, I'm doing it organically probably, and I know when I need to get up at 5 and work, but I feel like you're doing it strategically, and it's systems, and it's what we're talking about. So that's a great step of these reminders, and I'm going to set this amount of time on this day. Time blocking. There's so much. I mean, that TikTok that you sent me that we're not going to explain right now.
Because explaining TikToks isn't cool.
Well, yeah, it's not. And I don't think you can link them in the show notes. But I actually, I ran that by somebody else too. And we were like, that's a little bit different take on it.
About how to guard your time and use it better than you currently are. But yeah, I guess we could sort of explain it. The whole concept was not checking your email continuously. Not interrupting yourself to check your email every 15 minutes, but blocking off, I'm going to just work on these projects without checking my email for an hour at a time, for 2 hours at a time, and then coming out of that session and then handling all of your emails. And this person was talking about how eventually everybody else didn't expect an immediate response, but knew that they were going to get a timely response. And that change in awareness can actually change how you get all of your work done. And the emails you're sending are more intentional, less interrupted, more thought out, and everything you're doing is more strategic through the day because of it. And I think there's a lot of truth in that.
There's a lot. I have on my full focus planner that I'm going to implement that this week. We'll see. But I don't know. I feel like that's a really great goal because I know we've talked about like nibbling before. And like you go through a whole day and you're nibbling and you're doing quick emails and quick stuff. And you get to the end of the day and you're like, what did I even do? And I still didn't do like the 2 things that like really kind of were the things that needed to get done. And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah, the getting finished versus keeping up. And some days you need to finish a few things to get to the end of the day feeling a sense of satisfaction in your work. Yeah, one of something a total side quest here.
Side quest.
In the research is coming out associating burnout, which is such a buzzword right now. But so one of the things that I feel like really made sense about burnout is that if you feel like you're doing, the exact word was bullshit work, where you feel like, well, I worked all day, but what did I do? If you don't feel a sense of real accomplishment, you're just spinning your wheels all day. So sometimes it's getting to having a goal with a specific project and hitting that goal on a day. And then at the end of the day, it doesn't feel like you just spun your wheels all day. You finished the thing. So those days where you're nibbling, you're doing a little of this and a little of this and keeping everything in motion, you can come to the end of the day feeling more burnt out and less accomplished. Whereas if you were like, okay, I've got a lot of balls in the air, I've got to keep them all up, but I'm also going to take this task over here to completion. Or I'm going to block an hour and do everything on my reminder list or my task list. And even just that checking off all those things. For me, the day that I have time, especially with the sticky notes that I put on the bottom of my computer screens, So I can generally measure my stress level by how many are on there. Like right now I'm at 6. And some of them have more than one task on them.
Well, but it's like going to be your busiest 2 weeks of the season coming up, like now.
Yeah. But when I get to the point where I can take all those off, there's like that clear satisfaction of, into the trash. Like, And so recognizing where those little wins feel in your brain and trying to make sure that you're giving yourself some of those on every day, even while you're juggling a lot of things.
And I think my takeaway from this sort of leads into my next question, but it looks different for everyone.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, there's just so many, like, I know for me, if I'm really great and balanced, what I love to do is wake up, have some coffee, and do like the creative projects on my list first before I even hit my inbox. But sometimes of year, that's not possible. So it really just, you know, that leads me into like organic systems. I don't know. Is that a buzzword or did we make that up?
I have no idea, but I know exactly what you mean when you say it.
Right. Well, I was going to ask you about it. And then if you were like, what? Then I have a few things to say about it. But creating organic systems in your business, what does that mean to you? Because it's not like it takes nothing to implement them. That's not what we mean. Right.
Right. I think it comes back to the observing your own patterns and then creating a system organically that is based on what you're already doing.
Yes.
And I think in terms of teamwork, it's recognizing that everybody's organic system is going to be a little bit different and giving that flexibility within that team as well for like letting everyone develop their own and then seeing how everybody works together.
That's the hard part.
And that's the hard part. How do you implement something that's business-wide where it's one person's organic system, which may not be the same workflow as someone else's?
Yeah, that's the stuff I'm starting to learn, going from solopreneur to having more of a full-time team.
And same with my division is growing all of the time. And I came in as an event coordinator and now have another event coordinator that I supervise. And her work style is so different from mine, but she's really great at the things she does. And I need to figure out all of the time how to make sure that I'm not managing her into my systems, which her systems work great for her in the way that she's doing it. But it took me a long time to learn that difference in how to work together. But we also, because we work so closely together and overlap with the whole team, we also have to make sure that we're using the same communication flows with, you know, how we manage our projects. So we've figured out a lot of tools that are working for us, but it's a constant learning process of, in terms of how hard it is to observe yourself, track yourself, and grow for yourself. I guess that's the easy part. You can always do that, just putting in the time to do it. But then you have to also step back and watch how the people around you are working and observe them.
Oh, so much. And with people working remotely, it's even harder. You know, you're in an office. I would love to have an office, but they're few and far between where we are. And I feel like if I could be in the same space with my associate planners, it's so much easier to do what you're talking about than everybody working remotely.
Yeah. In our office, we have a partial remote schedule where everybody has a remote day where they get to work from home. And I deliberately scheduled it so that the team I work closest with, we all have the same remote day so that our communication style on that day is the same. Nobody is going to tell one person a thing while the other people are out, and they're going to not remember that they still have to tell the other person or whatever. It means we kick off that remote day with a Zoom meeting with all of us on it, and then like talk about what we're going to do for the rest of the day. But then if we need information from each other, we're all emailing each other, chatting each other, calling each other, versus the way we operate in the office where we pop into each other's office and say, hey, did you have this thing? Can you send it to me? Or, you know, can I ask you a question about this event? So I very deliberately had us share that remote day so that we're all in the office when we're all in the office and we're all out when we're all out.
I remember you talking about that before it happened and going, oh, this is what needs to happen.
Yeah, because initially my supervisor would like us to make sure that there's a good presence in the office. If somebody from a different division stops by and needs something, she wants to make sure that we've got coverage. So she was having us rotate and she was having nobody have the same day. And I kept seeing that was creating a disconnect. And I feel like we're much more connected now. It's working much better.
So it's just the little things. And I think it's awareness. It's just being aware of what you naturally do and then sort of curating that. And it's always changing.
Yes.
That's the thing. That was a question I had later on, but I really just ruined it just then. So how do you know when to update your systems? You know what I mean? Because you get in a flow and it's working and everybody's jamming. And then I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, it's constantly, I feel like it's time to update your systems when something is snagging or getting missed. And like we're right now, we have to come up with a new protocol for a couple of things in response to some changes and like it's constantly changing who's managing which pieces of things because we keep adding people and then it shifts what everybody's doing. So I feel like we are constantly modifying. And I feel like that's also something, if you're an event planner, you walk away from every event. I feel like
every event,
there's something that event planners all have in common with each other is that the most important meeting you have is the one after an event where you talk about what worked and what didn't, because you're constantly taking notes on what you can do better. And if you're not doing that, you're probably not a very good event planner. Like that is quintessential for you to be constantly learning. And I feel like the world of events is trend-based and people-based and is constantly changing. So if you aren't constantly paying attention and moving with that, you're going to fall behind and you're going to have a hard time keeping up. So I feel like in that nature already, we're already in our own systems, constantly critiquing ourselves. And I think that's what makes it, the change part of it is actually easier.
Right. So always.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's 3 more systems I'm going to implement right after we finish this.
Yeah. And you're great
I am always doing that. That's for sure.
But I was looking for new software. Like I've got this system I do, but is there something out there that can make this thing I'm already doing easier?
Yeah, but I have to curb my shiny object syndrome too. So it's, and I also feel like personality wise, I was going to say this earlier, I'm more of the shove myself into doing something as opposed to just doing the organic thing. Whereas you're definitely a better observer. I'm more of a I'm going to make myself do this.
Whereas I get in my head too much if I'm going to try to make myself do something.
And I'm the happiest.
Yeah.
See, everybody's different. Fun. Well, do we want to talk about your favorite topic, the love-loathe list? I think we may have barely hit on this on another episode, but it is a really great tool. And I've seen you use it not just with me, but with other people. And most importantly, with yourself, because I feel like the job that you're in, you've managed to really curate to where you love it because you have been aware of these things because you write them down.
Yeah. I feel like I probably got this idea from some professional development seminar or workshop. I think it was during, this is so long. I've been doing this for so many years. So many years. Or maybe, I don't know where I got it. But anyway, starting with, you get to work and you're like, it's like hitting your head against the wall. You can't get started. You can't figure out what to do. You feel super frustrated. That's the moment that you sit down and you crack that open and you write down, what am I hitting my head against right now? And you write down on the loathe list about everything that's causing you frustration and what you can't get through. And then while you're there, you stop and go to the positive for a minute and go, but right in this moment, what's actually working? And you write down. And that can sometimes spin that day and get you out of that headspace. So it's good for that bad day. And maybe even more important is on that day when you roll into work and you are in a flow state and everything is perfect, you need to go, ooh, this is so good. I need to remember this. And you crack that open and you write down everything that's flowing and why it feels good and which, how the stars are aligned and, which coworker's in a good mood today, whatever it is, whatever those things are. But then while you're there, also go, what's causing friction in the middle of my flow and jot that down. So now you've got your worst day with a lightly good thing and you've got your best day with a lightly bad thing. And they end up all giving you this information of, at one point I used it for, do I want to quit my job? And when I wrote down on that, and I think it started more loosely as a pros and cons of what am I getting from this job that is feeding my soul? And what is it that's making me feel stagnant? And I think summing it up in love and loathe, it makes it even feel more gut level. It doesn't have to be about that I feel like quitting my job. It just has to be what am I loving in this moment? What's jiving with me right now? And I think one of the things that you don't realize in the professional world until you're in it for a while is that every job, you get hired for a job description. But that job description essentially will be tailored to you because they can't, if you are a good employee and you are valuable to a company, they're going to go, oh, well, it turns out we had this in mind for this position, but that's not your strong suit, but you're really good at this other thing that we thought this other position was going to do. So let's flip flop that. And like constantly, I think it also helps that my supervisor has a really strong knowledge of HR and how to do that and how to mentor people to grow them to what they're best at.
Mm-hmm.
And that has so much to do with if you know what you're good at and what you want to be pushing yourself into. And where do you get that information about yourself? You just got to pay attention again.
Yeah.
Like coming back to which things do I not want to have to keep doing? And then when the next position comes open, you say, I want to grow in these directions, but it'd be great if the next person we hire took on these tasks.
Right. Or as an entrepreneur, it's what can you sub out? What can you hire someone else to do? So it looks a little bit different, but it's
Same concept,
a similar concept.
What is it that someone else could be doing that would reduce the friction in my daily life?
Mm-hmm. And whether it's not your strength or you just flat out don't like it.
Yep.
Thanks for listening to the Bloomhouse Podcast. Check out the show notes at bloomhousenc.com and connect with us on Instagram at bloomhousenc. We'll see you next time.